In the heart of a dense forest, where the trees whisper ancient tales and the wildlife roams freely, an extraordinary story of survival, compassion, and the deep bond between humans and animals unfolded. This is not just another tale of a rescued animal, it's a heartwarming, unforgettable journey of a wild deer who recognized the man who saved its life 5 years after a life-altering encounter. It all started on a fateful day when a massive landslide tore through the forest, sending boulders and debris tumbling down the hillside. Among the chaos, a small fawn found itself trapped, buried beneath the crushing weight of fallen rock. Despite the destruction, the little deer fought desperately for survival, its tiny body weak and battered, but its spirit still flickering with hope. Buried almost completely, only the fragile head was visible above the ground, as the young fawn gasped for breath, hoping against all odds that someone would come to its aid. The landslide was no ordinary storm. It had struck like a beast, with the force of nature itself taking no prisoners. The other members of the herd, terrified by the event, fled into the safety of the dense woods, leaving the vulnerable little one behind. The mother deer, in a panic, sprinted off with the others, her heart breaking as she realized she could not protect her young. The fawn, alone and abandoned, cried out weakly. Its voice echoed through the silent, still forest, a desperate plea for help that seemed to fall on deaf ears. But little did the fawn know, that cry would reach someone, a human, a man who, by chance, was walking through the forest just after the rain had stopped. Two men, on their regular walk through the woods, were taken by surprise when they heard the faintest sound, a faint, pitiful cry for help coming from somewhere deep in the woods. Their hearts raced as they rushed in the direction of the sound, guided by nothing but instinct. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth, but all they could hear was the voice of the helpless fawn. As they made their way through the thick trees and underbrush, they were stunned by what they saw: a tiny deer, helplessly trapped under a pile of massive rocks. The small creature's breathing was labored, and the sight was enough to make even the hardest of men shudder. Without a moment's hesitation, the two men knew what they had to do. They understood that time was running out, each second counted. They approached the fawn cautiously, aware of its fragile state. The poor creature, exhausted from struggling and gasping for breath, was too weak to even attempt to escape. It looked at them with wide, fearful eyes, its body trembling with both physical weakness and fear. The two men wasted no time. One of them knelt beside the deer, gently reaching out to touch its small head, speaking soothing words in an attempt to calm the frightened animal. The other man, determined to save the fawn, immediately began to dig. With their hands and whatever tools they had, they worked tirelessly, removing the heavy rocks and debris that had buried the little creature. The soil was tough, and the rocks were large and stubborn, but the men didn't stop. They dug and dug, hour after hour, not caring about the sweat on their brows or the exhaustion in their muscles. All that mattered was getting the deer out, giving it a chance at life. After what felt like an eternity, the men's persistence paid off. 2 long hours of hard labor finally led to the discovery of the fawn's body, almost entirely free from the weight that had trapped it. The little deer was weak and trembling, its body emaciated from the ordeal, but miraculously it was alive. It took a deep, shaky breath, and for the first time since the landslide, it seemed to feel the faintest glimmer of hope. The men, relieved yet still cautious, gently lifted the fawn, making sure not to cause it any further pain. They knew that the fawn wasn't out of danger yet, but at least it was no longer trapped. They had saved it. The fawn, still in shock, didn't resist as the men carefully carried it between them. They placed it into the bed of a small truck, wrapping it in blankets to keep it warm. As they drove back to the man's home, the fawn's large, round eyes locked onto the man who had saved it. The gaze between them was nothing short of magical, and unspoken connection, one that could not be ignored. The fawn, despite its weak state, looked up at him with a deep sense of trust and gratitude. It was as though it understood, even in its fragile state, that it owed its life to this human. When the men arrived at the man's home, they carefully set up a small, quiet space for the deer in a corner of the yard. A clean wooden crate was placed with soft bedding, and the man filled a bowl with fresh water and some tender greens. The deer, still too weak to stand on its own, slowly lowered its head to drink the water, its frail body shaking with exhaustion. The man and his family tended to the deer with love and care, offering warmth, food, and most importantly, time to heal. For 2 full days, the fawn rested and regained its strength. The man kept a watchful eye, ensuring the animal was comfortable. His patience and compassion were unwavering, and the little deer in turn showed its trust. There was no fear in its eyes when the man approached it, was as if it knew it was safe now. Slowly but surely, the fawn began to recover. Its body grew stronger, its coat grew fuller, and its once feeble legs gained the strength needed to stand. After 2 days of careful nurturing, the man knew it was time to take the deer back to the forest where it belonged. With a sense of fulfillment in his heart, the man drove the now healthy fawn back to the forest, where the landslide had changed everything. He had hope that despite the tragedy, the fawn's mother might still be waiting. When they arrived, the man's suspicions were confirmed. There, under the shade of a large tree, stood a lone adult deer, gazing restlessly into the distance. It was the mother, waiting. Her movements were slow, and her gaze fixed, as though she could feel her baby's presence somewhere nearby. As the man and the fawn approached, the scene that unfolded was one of the most moving moments of nature's grace. The two deer locked eyes, and without hesitation, the young fawn ran to its mother. The bond between them was undeniable. The mother's concern melted away, replaced by relief, joy, and an overwhelming sense of reunion. The two stood together, side by side, beneath the sheltering tree, ready to return to the wild where they belong. But just before the fawn bounded off with its mother, it turned back. It looked up at the man who had saved its life. In an incredible display of emotion, the fawn ran towards the man, stopping right before him. Its large, doe-like eyes seemed to sparkle, as if trying to communicate something, a thank you, a recognition of the love and care it had received. The fawn, in an almost ritualistic manner, lowered its head and knelt before the man, offering the most sincere sign of gratitude that anyone could ever hope for. It was a profound gesture, one that only deepened the connection between them. The man stood still, deeply moved by the moment. His eyes filled with tears, not just of joy but of awe at the rare bond he had witnessed. In that moment, he understood that the connection between humans and animals, when nurtured with kindness and love, can transcend any barrier, whether it's the divide between species or the vastness of time. The fawn's gratitude, its recognition, and its silent appreciation spoke louder than any words could. From that day forward, the fawn, now a full-grown deer, would often visit the man's home with the rest of the herd. They would roam the garden, graze in the fields, and stand in the yard as if to say thank you once more. The deer had not forgotten the man who had saved its life. It was clear that the bond between them was far from one-sided. The wild deer had found its savior, and the man had found a deep, everlasting connection with the creatures of the forest. As the years passed, the fawn grew into a magnificent, strong deer, with the same round eyes that had once looked up at the man with trust. The herd would wander into his yard every now and then, a constant reminder that kindness knows no boundaries. The man, now older, would smile every time he saw them, knowing that the connection they shared was not just a fleeting moment. It was a lasting, beautiful bond, a testament to the power of compassion and the magical way in which humans and wildlife can share the same world. The story of the fawn and the man is a powerful reminder that our actions, no matter how small, can have a lasting impact on the lives of others, human or animal, and that sometimes the most unexpected friendships can form in the most extraordinary ways.